We've been getting lots of requests for watercolor these days. People just say, do something in watercolor, and I say, give me something specific. Give me a specific request. Well, this person did just that. This person asked about the process of blocking in, especially using Notan. And she also asked that I include the sequence of my process for watercolor painting. Well, I'm going to divide this into two quick tips. The first one will be about how to set up a Notan for watercolor, and then the following one will be about sequence, include something else special too. In watercolor, just as in oil painting or any other method of painting or technique of painting, it's important to place your images first. So I'm going to do just that. Now I'm going to work from this little photo of these maple leaves in the fall. And so the first consideration now, I'm going to center the technique, the Notan technique, around this maple leaf, but it's in the surroundings. So the first thing I want to do here is just do a very quick sketch that places this maple leaf, since that's going to be the main subject of the Notan. And so we'll just do something like that and place it. And I'm going to try to get this big enough so that you can see the full effects of Notan. Now, if you don't know what Notan is, those of you who've been studying with me for quite some time certainly know what Notan is. It's really a Japanese concept that means light and dark, and we use it in painting to delineate between light and shadow. We know that where light rays are hitting, things fall into light, but then where light rays can't hit or where they can't strike, things fall into shadow. And that's where we get the whole value configuration, is according to how the light rays are creating light and shadow. And so what we'll be doing then is I'll be showing you how to read just shadow and place just shadow, but how we would do it in watercolor. Well, okay, that will probably do. I don't really need to get anything beyond that. Now I'm going to place a perimeter here. And I'm just going to sort of block it off like this, and something like that. I prefer to get the image placed first and then place the perimeter. So we'll give it a little bit more space on this side than we do on that side. Give it a little bit. Okay, that's probably good enough right there. Now, the question is, what's in shadow and what's not in shadow? When we look at the photo, now we can feel that this is probably a diffused light, so it's difficult to read shadow, not in shadow, but we can squint and see that these leaves on this side and this area right in here, a little bit right in here and here and here, all seem to be in some degree of shadow. Well, when we're doing Notan, we're not showing differences in values. We're just showing how to discern light from shadow. And so in watercolor, the best way to do that is to use a single transparent color. Usually ultramarine blue works really, really well for this, but very, very light. Whereas in other areas of studying Notan, we might go very, very dark. But with watercolor, we will go very, very light. So what I'm going to do here is to set up a wash on my palette that is very light. So now we know that we use water for our light in watercolor. And so I want this to be very light. Let's see just how light that little wash is. I'll test it right down here. That's probably a really good value for setting up the Notan. Now, here's the deal about watercolor. We've got, unlike a lot of mediums we work with, we have not just the color and not just brush strokes and that sort of thing, but we're dealing with also degrees of wetness that's going to affect everything we do. So we need to dampen this paper just a little bit before we set the Notan so that we don't have hard edges. Now we know you can see it right here. you see where I made that little stroke, we get a hard edge. And then I'll go right over here and show you, and just barely dampen. Too much blue in there. Just barely dampen this. And when it's just barely dampened like that, I can do the same sort of stroke, and you see you get a softer edge right there. So you see the difference. Now, in watercolor, we need that edge softer so that we're able then to control the hardness or softnesses of edges as we move along. So we'll start with that. Now, what I'm going to do is to get a different brush and just give a very light wash, and I'm going to give that wash over the whole thing, even over the areas where I'm not going to put the paint. So we'll just go very lightly, and I'm using this method rather than the spray method I normally use to wet the surface of the paper, so that I can control the wetness. I don't want it to be that wet. So you see I'm kind of and also with watercolor you might not be able to see what I'm doing, but you have to sort of get yourself so that you can see the degree of gloss. You got to move yourself so that you can see the degree of gloss, because that is going to determine whether or not you get those edges soft, or whether they're going to go hard, or if the edges go away totally. If you have it too wet, the edges will just disperse and they won't be there at all. All right, that's probably good enough. Now, for the Notan, here's the way I'll start. I am not reading degrees of value. I'm only reading the fact of shadow. And so I'll start right here. All this is in shadow up here, so I'll just move the brush across like that. Now I'm going to continue to move the brush in this direction to catch areas that are in shadow right here. Now I'm going, while I'm over here, I'll move down. I see that all that's in shadow right there, so I'll just continue to move the brush down like that and catch those things that are in shadow there. I see shadow right here. Now it's when I need to reload the brush, so I blot it, reload it with that same value of wash, and I see this area of shadow right down in here. I see that that shadow continues to come right in here, and then it goes about right in there, and then we begin to see more light over here in the other leaf. Now I'll get that sort of dispersed, and I'll go over here and pick up the edge of where I left off. I'll pull the brush right up against the edge of the leaf, as we see right over here, and we see all this is in shadow, so I'll just move that back and forth. It's not a good idea to stroke it more than once if you can help. So I'll just move it back and forth, and you see by catching the last edge, or the last edge of the brush stroke I just made, I can keep that smooth. And to get a true Notan, you need to keep that smooth. Now I've got a kind of another little light down here, so I'll just work that shadow areas around that light. I'll go right over here. I've got to be sure I pick up the same value. It's got a little bit dark. The water, as the water evaporates from the palette, it gets darker, so that needs to be taken into consideration too. So I'm going right over here. Now I'm seeing we have light in here. This one is in somewhat shadow. I'm just going to leave that as light. I'm going to pick up that shadow area right here and move it like right over in here like that. There's a little bit of that down here, and same thing right here. Now then this area sort of falls into what we might call shallow shadow. So I can do that to make it, if I wanted more light over here on this one, or want to show more light, then I could do something like I'm doing right here. Then pull that right around in this area right here to pick up just that shadow. Now I can come right over here on this side and just, it's the same wash. Now you see it's beginning to get dry. The paper's beginning to get dry, so I've got to move fast if I want to keep those soft edges. So I'll just catch that shadow right there, just like that. Now that gives us the Notan. The thing I want you to remember about Notan is that it is not degrees of value. That's what a lot of people don't seem to get. That when you're reading Notan, you're reading just the fact there is shadow there. That's all you're saying with those Notan marks. There is shadow there. And where you leave it light, you're saying there is not shadow there. So why do you want to do that? Well, one of the main things that we do as artists is to show something of what the light source is and what the light source is doing. So if we have on our paper or on our canvases a Notan set, then we can, that is sort of a guide to us while we're working. So when we go in to do the next step, we can take that guide and then begin to easily develop the difference between lights and shadows within that guide. Now, when all this, the other thing about Notan in watercolor is that before you go back in and develop anything on top of this, this must be thoroughly dry. So that means you need to wait. It's probably not a good idea to take a hair dryer at this point. Once it reaches a point where you no longer can see any gloss, it might be okay to take a hair dryer and continue to dry it there. But the idea is before you continue or start developing the painting, that you be sure that this is thoroughly dry. So we're going to leave this right here just like this, wind up the quick tip, but then in the next quick tip we're going to show you how we can use the Notan and address some other things too. Be sure and view all of our quick tips, and while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianneMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.